previous video where I used this corn cob. Today I will make another one with the corn cob, and I'll be reading Crime and Punishment from Fyodor Dostoyevsky. A tiny bit of it. I'm, as you can see, not really far in the book. I just started, but I was at a passage that was quite interesting, and I wanted to read it for you. I already filled this one up. It's a pretty interesting book, but first, you know the deal. Nice. Now I have to tamp it down. And going in for part 2. As you can see, it's lit. Let me take a sip of the water. And let's start the video. I hope it stays on. Okay, so it's on part 1, chapter 6, page 87. At first, this had actually been a long time earlier. Now, let me preface this by saying it's about a Russian ex-student who doesn't have a lot of money and is thinking about murdering a pawnbroker. It's an old lady that's like 6 feet tall and has a lot of money, enough to save dozens of families out of poverty. And he sewed a part in his jacket in which he can hold an axe with which he wants to do the bad thing. And in this part he's contemplating, like, how come criminals get caught. And it says, at first, this had actually been a long time earlier. A certain question had preoccupied him. Why were nearly all crimes so easily tracked down and found out? And why did the traces of nearly all criminals show up so clearly? Little by little, he had arrived at certain diverse and interesting conclusions. And in his opinion, the principal cause was to be found less in the criminal's lack of ability to conceal the material evidence of his crime than it was in the criminal himself. It was the criminal himself who, in almost every case, became subject, at the moment of his crime, to a kind of failure of will and reason, which were replaced by a childish and phenomenal frivolity. And this right at the very moment when the things that were needed most of all were reason and caution. According to the way he saw it, this eclipse of reason and failure of will attacked human beings like an illness, which were were replaced by childish and phenomenal frivolity. It is right, and this right at the very moment when the things that were needed most of all were reason and caution. According to the way he saw it, this eclipse of reason and failure of will attacked human beings like an illness, developing slowly and reaching their crisis not too long before the enactment of the crime. They continued to manifest themselves in the same critical fashion at the moment of the crime itself, and also for a short time thereafter. Depending on the individual, then they passed in the same way that every illness passes. On the other hand, the question of whether it was an illness that gave rise to the crime, or whether the crime itself was, by its own peculiar nature, invariably accompanied by something resembling an illness, was one that he did not yet feel able to determine. Arriving at such conclusions, he decided that where he personally was concerned in his own undertaking, there could be no such morbid upheavals, and that his reason and his will would remain inalienably with him throughout the entire enactment of what he had planned, for the sole reason that what he had planned was not a crime. We shall omit the lengthy process by which he had arrived at his last conclusion. We have run too far ahead, even as it is. We shall merely add that in general, the factual, purely material difficulties of the undertaking played a decidedly secondary role within his mind. As long as I can manage to preserve my will and my reason and exercise them over them to the fullest extent, then they in their turn will all be vanquished when it becomes necessary for them to acquaint themselves with every last microscopic detail of the affair. But the affair was not making any progress. He continued to have not the slightest faith in his final decision, and when the fatal hour struck, everything turned out not the way at all. But somehow, unexpectedly, even one might almost say astonishingly, a circumstance of the most trivial kind landed him in an impasse. Even before he had got to the bottom of the stairs, as he drew level with his landlady's kitchen, the door to which as always stood wide open, he directed a cautious, disapproving look inside, in order to find out in advance whether Natasha, being absent, the landlady was there, or, if she was not, whether the door to her room was properly shut. He did not want her peeping out of where. When he went in for the eggs, great, however, was his amazement when he suddenly saw that not only was Natasha at home and in their kitchen, but she was actually doing some work. She was taking the laundry out of its basket and hanging it on the clothesline. At the sight of him, she stopped what she was doing, turned towards him and continued to stare at him steadily. All the time he was passing, he averted his eyes and continued his descent as though he had not noticed anything. But the whole affair was at an end. He had no ex. He was horribly shaking. Where did I get the idea that she'd be bound to be out just then? Why was I so certain of it? Why? Why? He felt crushed, even in some way humiliated. He wanted to jeer at himself with malicious spite. A slow-witted animal rage seethed up inside him. He paused in the entranceway in order to reflect, to go out on the street like this, for show. As if he were taking a walk, was a prospect he found repugnant. The thought of going back to his room was one still more repugnant. What a chance I've lost forever, he muttered as he stood, shorn of purpose, in the entranceway. Right opposite, the yard keeper's dark little cubicle, the door to which also stood open. Suddenly he gave a start. From the little room, which was only 2 yards away from him, his eyes had caught the glint of something underneath a bench on the right. He looked around him. No one. On tiptoe he approached the yard keeper's room, went down the 2 little steps, and called the yard keeper in a faint voice. As I thought. He's not at home, but he must be somewhere nearby in the yard, because the door is wide open. He pounced headlong on the axe. It was an axe, dragging it out from under the bench where it lay in between 2 logs, and right there and then, while he was still inside, fastened it to his loop, stuck both hands in his pockets, and stepped out of the cubicle again. No one had noticed anything. If reason won't, the devil will, he thought, smiling a strange, ironic smile. This stroke of fortune had thoroughly revived his spirits. He continued on his way quietly and sedately, without hurry. In order to not give rise to any suspicion, he paid little attention to the passers-by, making a great effort not to look them in the face at all, and to be as inconspicuous as possible. Then he remembered he was wearing his hat. For God's sake, I even had some money the day before yesterday, yet I didn't go and buy a cap instead. A curse erupted from his soul. Let me light this back up again. I don't know if you like me reading, but as you may know, I love reading, and I love Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I already read a book of him called The Idiot. Wonderful book. It's basically about a guy that is like living in a world of modern day. Well, not really modern day. It was written in 1800 something. And what the author was describing, like how it's impossible to have all the Christian virtues and values in the modern era or in the current time, where most of humanity is like almost evil, sneaky and stuff like that. Really nice book. And this book is certain John Bailey said Dostoyevsky's finest masterpiece. It's called Crime and Punishment. And it says, Dostoyevsky's great novel of damnation and redemption evokes a world where the lines between innocence and corruption, good and evil blur. It tells the story of Raskolnikov, a destitute and desperate former student who wanders through the slums of St. Petersburg and commits a random murder without remorse or regret. He imagines himself to be beyond conventional moral laws, but as he embarks on a dangerous game of cat and mouse with a police investigator, Raskolnikov is pursued by the growing voice of his conscience and finds the noose of his own guilt tightening around his neck. It's a Penguin Classics book. I'm not really a movie or a series guy, because I'm of the opinion that there isn't a director on this world that can make a movie and invoke emotions in me as much as I can do it within my own head, making the movie and invoking the emotion. Like when you read a book, you make the rooms, the interior, the world, the design, the faces, the features of the people that are in the book. You all make them in your own head. Hence why oftentimes when people have read a book, be it Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, The Witcher, oftentimes the book people get angry because the movie in their head had so much more details and was so much more better than the series or the movie that was made. And that's why I love and started loving reading books. And it's also a bit of escapism. When you read, you're in the world of the book you are reading. And you are not you're not behind the screen, like behind your phone or behind the computer screen or your TV. You're just sitting in your room, garden or balcony, having something with it, having birds or people on the background, a nice drink, and the book you're reading. Tell me if you guys like it, that I switched it up a little bit, and that I'm reading parts from some of my favorite books. I have a lot of books that I've read, and if you want me to talk about them, let me know, so I can. Thanks for watching again. See you in the next video. Have a great day and have a great life. See you next time. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a like and a comment. And if you're not subscribed, I would appreciate it if you would. Through this way, I would like to give a special thanks to Phil at Excelsior7, Dominic Vane, Rob, Denise, Antox, Sam B, and Sillard Jacob. Thank you. Have a good day and have a good life. Bye bye.